Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of JourneyCast from Scalibrium. I'm your host, Rob Swymer. We have today Kelly Sack. Hey, Kelly, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Rob. How about you?
Good, good. We're recording this on Memorial Day Friday, so that's commitment. Thank you so much for your time in doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, we're going to be talking about coaching for willingness. But before we get started, I know a little bit about you, and please tell our viewers about you and your company, Studio A to A, and how you deal with leadership and your consulting and coaching business. So, start off, just give me a little bit about, hey, what makes Kelly tick and what lights you up, Kelly?
Yeah, well, I'm really all about intention and really helping leaders get aligned with their intention. The Studio A to A, the A to A is asked to answer, so it's about inquiry and it's about really getting them to a place in an environment where they can stop and think. And I can ask some really provocative questions that get them to start to think about what's important to them, and they can show it more with more intention. And that's where the align to activate comes in. So
Yeah.
A to A is ask to answer, align to activate. And it's really but that alignment that makes sure that the actions that are taken are going to really achieve the goals that they want to achieve.
Awesome. You mentioned the word intention. I really want you to kind of give me a little bit more about how you think about when you hear the word intention. What does that kind of mean to you?
I think it's all about just really self-awareness and understanding, what is motivating you, what's driving you, what are your values, what are the things that are important to you, and really developing a practice and a discipline around centering in that every
Mhm.
day so that you can start your day with intention, and
Mm.
then everything else is gonna flow from there. And also ending your day also to say, okay, that reflection, did I where what was I able to achieve? Where
Mm.
did I get off track? Why did I
Mm.
get off track? And how can I do better tomorrow? Just a
Mm.
growth mindset around it.
We're very much aligned. I talk about the physiology of the body and how you show up with intention, and the physical intelligence of leadership, and this really wraps nicely into what you're talking about. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun here talking about sort of what the next generation of leadership looks like, and it is different. It's different. Leadership is different today than it was, when I started out 40 years ago. It was a much different play, and I think today we're seeing the evolution of what does it really mean to be in a leadership position and to lead with intention and certainty and well, emotional intelligence too is big, and we talked a little bit about that and how your practice really embodies all that too. So you've shared with me sort of where you've been and your development framework and the work you've done on so many different levels of leadership to impact the people that we all work with, we work for, we work around, right? I want to know more about what you're doing there at your practice. So give us a little bit more of the sort of the under the covers of what you do on a daily basis and how you impact the next generation of leaderships.
Yeah, so I think it's really, first it is about helping the leaders understand what their role is and to get clear about what the expectations, what are the capabilities, what are the competencies and skills that are expected in that leadership role. And so what we find is a lot of times people have a hard time leaving behind some of the things
Yeah,
that in their mind made them successful. And so
sure.
it's those transition points where I find that leaders need the most support to help them really identify what's required of me in this transition, what's required of me in this new role, and getting really clear about that. And then also just really helping leaders understand that, leadership is about connection. It's really
Mm,
about connecting with the team and connecting the team to the vision and the goals.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
it's really evolved, and I think with technology, it's really enabled us to get away from the old management control type of leadership model that's this directing and control, and really opened it up more to really look at the leader's job as that connection, but also developing and really spending the time getting to know their team so that they can have more of an individual approach towards the way that they develop their team. And I think that there's this, people come to work because they wanna do their best. I don't think
Right.
there's anyone who shows up and is like, "I don't care." And so I
Right.
think it's but I think leaders have to really see each person as a unique individual and understand the hooks that they need to leverage in order to drive
Yeah.
that motivation and to drive
Yeah.
that connection.
No, I love that. I love that. It's every employee. I always say, people that have children can relate, to this, right? Every kid needs to be kind of disciplined or parented different, right? I've got five in my blended family, and every single one of them is so different. You could never just treat them one. And I think that goes hand in hand with how we lead people, and we lead the employee. We lead the person, and it's really important to not just lead the employee. I think back in the day, that's sort of what we did. We led the employee, and that was it. What drove the success. Today, it's much more. I call it sort of in leadership. We talk about mindset a lot, and I'm sure you do too. Every day, that word probably slips through my tongue 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But really, we all know what that means and how that manifests. But really the next level, what I always say, the next level of outstanding really is when you talk about the energy of leadership. And that's really what's going on here, and that's what we're gonna be talking about. That's I think a lot about what you bring to the table as well
Yeah.
when I spoke to you before. And it really is the energy that we bring and how we bring ourselves and our authentic selves as leaders. So before we get started, I kinda wanna just sort of relax a little more. Tell me a great story that you have about what you just said about leadership and something that maybe happened to you or you saw it play out in life or business where it kind of all came together.
Yeah. Well, I think that, one of the great things that I'm able to do is to provide feedback to leaders on their impact.
Yeah.
And it's not, and the discrepancy between intent and impact, that's the gap that I'm helping them close. And so it's when I've worked with so many leaders, and I'm thinking of one particular individual that was just shocked, devastated by the way that he was perceived and the impact that he was having
Mhm.
on the people on his team, the way that all of his behaviors were being perceived by others. And so
Yeah.
working with them to really close that impact and help that intention match impact. So it's not just about being intentional, but it's also about making sure and getting the feedback and seeking the feedback and asking, am I having the impact I'm intending, or where do I need to pivot and how do I need to change, whether for this individual, this client, this person,
Mm.
whomever it is, this team, to really align that impact with the intention as well.
I love that. I love that, and that's a great story, and it's something that, it's real life, right? This is what happens, and it happens in life and business, and we have to really be mindful of all this, and, the speed. I always say the speed of life, the speed of business is such now that, you really need to get a handle on this stuff. It's not woo-woo anymore, as
No.
I always say.
Well, and
You know
thanks for all the MRIs and the neuroscience. Now we can really see that this is true. We had the experience of the mind body connection in the past, but now we can validate that with scientific data that I think just gives it a validity that we can bring into organizations, and they're just starved for it. I mean, I think that everyone is overwhelmed, they're distracted, they need that centering and that grounding, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we can now validate that and make them feel more comfortable embracing
oh,
it.
you're talking my language, of course.
Yeah.
This is all I do, right? And I'm seeing such an uptick. CEOs are bringing me in, leaders are bringing me in to do exactly what you just said, and sort of ignite and activate, the leadership kind of energy, if you will, taking the mindset and bringing the energy, and that's all about that physical intelligence that I talk about, and making sure we're releasing the right hormones, right? When the neuroscience, when you mention that word, I just light up because that's sort of where my world is, right, over the last decade, more than a decade now, and all that neuroscience backs it up. You are absolutely correct, and how it all works and how it all plays together. I don't know of our listeners if you write this down. Paul Zak, one of my absolute heroes in the neuroscience of leadership. He wrote a book called Trust Factor, and it talks about all of that coming together and leadership in life and business, but how you build engaged cultures with releasing those right hormones. And we've got all the neuroscience to back that up, that it absolutely is a game changer. We know from Gallup studies that come out every year, they always come out, right? The future of work, work, work. And it always says cultures that are more engaged are more profitable. And over the last several years, yeah, it's Kelly, it's always been, I don't know what, 22, 23% more profitable, pretty consistent. I mean, that is to me something that CEOs and leaders need to take a look at, right? It's not woo woo. This is real stuff. And we're going to
Right.
talk about that. Yeah, it's really great. So you and I are aligned on that. And I hope our listeners are listening to this and taking notes, because this is where, again, you go from good to great. I love that saying. That's a great book. But I always say, here's the next level, outstanding. How do you get beyond great to outstanding? And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about right now. So, hey, you light me up, Kelly. This is great stuff. So I think
Yeah.
what we're going to do now is let's take it into the whole realm of skill will. And this has been around forever. As a leader, well, hey, every year, every quarter, whatever it would be, I'm like, okay, let's do our skill will, right? Some will be smiling about it, and some will be like, "Oh, no, not again," right? It's
Yeah.
like, this is what it's all about, but this is the way of the world. We have to really be serious about this. It's part of who we are and what we do and how we become successful. So I wanna pick up on that skill, Will, and coaching through the willingness. This is the key. And I love this. This is so different, right? So, people that are listening to this, they're taking notes, it's not just skill, Will. We're gonna talk about willingness. So let's start with the mindset. I love this. Let's get right back into it. You advocate for a mindset shift when it comes to coaching. You talk about that in your practice and all your posts, and tell us more about that and why that shift matters.
Yeah, so I think that the first of all, leaders need to understand what it means to coach. And I think that
Yeah.
leaders have, they feel like that they have to have all the answers and they tell. And coaching is about asking questions and engaging the person in their development. And I think that the mind shift is really around the curiosity,
Yeah.
just being curious about what's
Yeah.
going on and
Yeah.
suspending the story that the leader is telling themselves about why this person's not willing. And so I think that it is to come into the conversations or approach development with curiosity and an open mind, and to be aware of what story you're telling yourself about this person, and put that aside if you can, and just be open that you might be wrong and be open to really giving that individual an opportunity to tell you what is getting in their way.
So we
And
have
also
by
be
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
and also be part of the solution. So again, I think that
Yeah. Yeah.
that it's okay, here's what you're doing wrong and here's what you need to do to fix it. Well, that model really doesn't work to really engage the person in taking ownership. And sometimes willingness is about ownership. And so
Mm,
it's
mm.
to get that person engaged and to own it, they have to be part of the solution, and they have to feel that they have come up with an action that works for them. What works for the leader this might not work for that person.
Right.
And so you have to really be able to be open and curious about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about the word bias. Um, yeah, so expand upon that. I'm sure you've got stories of where, frankly, being completely vulnerable. I mean, I came into organizations many times where I had to kind of fix the culture. And here I am now. Do I have biases against certain people that I don't even know yet? Right. And I've been just told, okay, this person does this or X, Y. You get the, what do you call it? The brain dump, right? Of the prior administration that come, here's all the stuff you need to know. And I always used
Yeah.
to say, no, stop, stop, stop. I need to make my own decisions. Right. But, some of that will leak in. Right. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the bias of leadership? Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah.
kinda
Well,
throw
and to your point, a lot of that story you're getting when you're coming into an organization is tainting
Yeah.
that's part of the story is
Yeah.
that they have that story, right? And
Right.
so I think that it's important to say, how is the leadership story impacting the culture that they feel this way or they think this way
Yeah.
about this person or this team? And so I think that it's really important again to really understand that self-awareness piece. What are and really be vulnerable and be honest. What are my biases? And that's hard
Mm,
work. And
yeah.
that's really vulnerable work to ask yourself and admit that you have these stories that you're telling yourself and that you do have these stereotypes. But back to the neuroscience, I mean, that's the way our brains are wired is to try
Sure.
to simplify. And so
Yep.
it's a natural thing. And so really taking that judgment out of even, taking the judgment out of how they're seeing people, but taking their self-judgment
Yeah.
away to enable these leaders to really, you know, to be able to show up and be available for the person that they're coaching.
I love that. Just recently last week, Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, came out. There was an article in Fortune, and he was detailing how emotional intelligence, vulnerability from a leader, right, is actually needed today. It's a competitive advantage, and I believe that too. It goes back to it's not woo, right? This is really something that needs to happen. In fact, he was citing examples where investors would even lean in when they saw leaders being vulnerable and using emotional intelligence and empathy. And he's actually seen it as a way to increase innovation as well. So these things are really the neuroscience behind this stuff is really coming out to be more than just kind of soft selling, if you will, back when I started doing it, when it was way ahead of people were looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" But this has
Yep.
really now come into where this is the way you have to lead. So do you have any examples, you could share from that coming in as well? And I love
Yeah.
stories. Just recently last week, Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, came out. There was an article in Fortune, and he was detailing how emotional intelligence, vulnerability from a leader, right, is actually needed today. It's a competitive advantage, and I believe that too. It goes back to it's not woo, right? This is really something that needs to happen. In fact, he was citing examples where investors would even lean in when they saw leaders being vulnerable and using emotional intelligence and empathy. And he's actually seen it as a way to increase innovation as well. So these things are really the neuroscience behind this stuff is really coming out to be more than just kind of soft selling, if you will, back when I started doing it, when it was way ahead of people were looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" But this has
Yep.
really now come into where this is the way you have to lead. So do you have any examples, you could share from that coming in as well? And I love
Yeah.
stories. I love stories.
Yeah,
So
this is a great point because I think that again it's about intentional
yeah.
authenticity. So an intentional vulnerability because you really have to know what your team needs and what, how much vulnerability or how much authenticity is required in that moment. So it's that
Yep.
situational agility that's required and knowing your audience and not over flexing into the vulnerability in ways that are going to make your team unsettled, anxious.
Sure.
And so yes, sharing the vulnerability that supports a growth mindset, I definitely see that being an extremely effective, like, to have the opportunity to share, the we have leaders share their story, their journey, their leadership journey, and we encourage them to share it with their teams. They share it with us because it's how we learn their patterns and as coaches and how they operate. But we encourage them to share it with their teams because part of that journey is our mistakes and the things that they
Mm,
learned from that
yeah.
and how they grew from
Yeah.
those experiences.
No, I love
So,
that. I love that. And I have I always tell leaders it's okay not to know everything. It's okay to be vulnerable. And I think, we know from the science again that vulnerability builds trust as well. And going into a leadership position and just being the all-knowing wizard behind the curtain, uh, it's not it's not really gonna work,
no,
because
it's
yeah,
not
it's
possible, but
no.
we can, pretend. We can try to pretend.
Right, right, but
Yeah.
it's not possible, and, the mistakes that I've made in my career are many, 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 and hopefully you learn from them, but, I know how not to do things for sure. But so let's talk about giving back a little bit and, as managers, directors, leaders, front line, first line, second line, all the above, giving feedback, that's a huge part of the job, and man, that was to me, that was like, it was the hardest part of the job. And,
Why?
many well, that's the thing. It's because I was so concerned about how it would land to make sure that it was a positive, feedback, that it was coaching to get them to the next level, and it wasn't, "Hey, you don't do this well." It was more like, "Here's how we can do something better together," or, I learned through the years. I remember as a young leader, I gave really horrible, shitty feedback to be completely blunt,
Yeah.
and, I learned how to round out the edges but it's something that a lot of leaders that I talk to, in fact, there isn't many leaders that I talk to that would say, "I love giving feedback." I've never
Yeah.
really heard that before, "I love giving feedback," said no leader I've ever talked to, right? So, how do you coach them through this limited belief, I would call it, where, "Hey, I just don't like giving feedback," or, "I never been able to do it. I just wish I didn't have to do it." How do you get past all those limited beliefs that we all have, whether we wanna believe it or not, right? So how do you coach somebody to that? I can't wait to kinda learn from you, and everybody listening, get those pens out, take notes. This is gonna be worth it. So, I'm
Yeah.
gonna wind you up, Kelly, go for it.
All right. So, well, the very first thing is the step that people miss that can really help the person receiving the feedback just be more open to it. And it's explaining like what is your intention in giving the feedback? What is your investment? So it's really shifting feedback from being this about the benefiting the leader and really presenting it as being given to benefit the individual that's getting the feedback. So feedback is a gift, and feedback is
Mm,
something that
yeah,
demonstrates investment. It
yeah.
demonstrates investment because it is uncomfortable, and so if a leader is willing to give that feedback in a authentic, genuine way, and not put up all those barriers of just being tough and gruff, but actually approaching the person as a human being saying, "Hey, I care about you and I want to see you grow and I'm invested in you and I've seen some things that I think if you shifted or made some adjustments, it would help your performance." And so just teeing the conversation up.
Yeah.
Also, there's this great book. I have it right here. It's called Thanks for the Feedback.
Oh, cool.
And so it's about being open to feedback even when it's off base, unfair, poorly delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. And so I think that leaders also need to say, "Hey, is this a good time?"
Oh, yeah.
You know, and give someone the option of saying not right now, but later. But I think that it's really the mind the really shift around feedback that I've seen that has the biggest impact in helping leaders become more comfortable is to say shift your giving feedback to help the person, not it's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
And so and then follow the model where you own your observations, right?
Yeah.
Like so really make sure that you can own the feedback that you're giving them, that it's not hearsay, that it's not something that you're getting from other people, that there's very specific examples and observations that you see that
Yeah.
this is impacting their performance. And then again, coaching to the action. So making sure that you engage them and ask them, what's getting in their way and what's preventing them from making the change. Because anytime somebody makes a change, they got to give something up. So you
Mhm.
need to dig into what is it that they're afraid of giving up? What is it they're afraid that they may lose by changing this behavior?
Mhm.
There's a competing commitment to
Wow.
behavior. And
Yeah.
so if you can really mine for what that competing commitment is, then you can really help the person become more aware that that competing commitment is getting in their way, and really own, do you really want to give that up? And if not, then
Yeah.
that's going to continue to get in your way.
That's pretty cool. I love that. Thank you so much for that. And I think that everybody listening got something out of that because it is one of the most difficult things part of leadership to do is to how do we give that feedback? And, the way you were talking, it sort of likens to what I like to say about the give versus get principle. Go into to give versus get to serve and to be a servant leader. If you're truly a servant leader, then everything you just said could come that naturally, right? It's going to be something that, you're going to go in to help that person. And I can't tell you how many times I've done feedback meetings and it's turned into sort of a coaching session and it's turned into a what do you really want to do next, what is this the and I've seen him actually go to, is this the right place for you at this point, or is this the right job for you, or can I help you do, is there something else we can do together and have a succession plan, or whatever the case may be. It can go into so many different directions if you go in with that mindset versus just, hey, I'm going to give you direct feedback that you're going to make all the changes. And by the way, good luck. You know,
Right. Yeah, and here's how to do it. This is my way. This is
right.
the way I would do it if but, and it really requires a connection and knowing your team. I think that that's one thing that leaders really need to spend time
Yeah.
doing is to understand their job is to see their team and know what motivates them so that they can pull those levers and really activate that when they're having these conversations. And so I think that taking the time to get to know your team and understand them on a personal level is really important in order to be able to hook that feedback into what matters to them, because you
Yeah.
have to know what matters to them to be able to say, hey, I understand your goal is this and this is why I want to give you the feedback because I'm invested in you achieving your goal.
Business is a human game. It always will be. No matter how much technology we come up with, AI or whatever, we have to coexist with that. And I'm a big believer in the next shiny object, of course. But yeah,
Well, and that's really, the basis of the redirection of my company is that with technology, it gives us even more opportunities to connect because the technology's doing all the stuff that used to were the management controls and the
yeah,
data and those kinds of things where now we if we use it correctly and if we leverage it right, then it should give us more opportunities for that human connection that's needed
yeah.
to
It
really
sure
drive
is.
performance.
Yeah, so needed, especially today. Coming back from the pandemic and the hybrid, the non-hybrid, the working, people now complaining coming back into the office. They're making us come back in the office. I got to leave Greece where I worked for 4 years, and it's a crazy world we live in, right?
Yeah.
And an article just came out. I think it was the day before yesterday, Business Insider, talking about all this work and what's going on with hybrid, non-hybrid people having been forced to come back to work when really that's where they all started. So it's a bizarre thing that we're working with, but these are mindsets that we have to deal with, and obviously that comes to skill will more than ever, right? The willingness to come back to the office or be in a hybrid or just fully hybrid, and give up certain privileges and sort of things that we've been able to do right in the last few years. So, all right, let's bring this equation back into the skill will. Holistically, you can leaders take you know what you shared there in the feedback discussions. What can leaders do as they prepare for those conversations, as those one-on-ones? Whether they're, most of them are scheduled. I get that. And in that case, kind of know what you're going into. You've got some thoughts and what you want to accomplish. But how does a leader prepare for that mindset to go into that coaching skill will call?
Yeah. And so we do facilitated experiences and we
Mhm.
actually ask people bring a feedback conversation that didn't go well or that you're planning to have so that it's real life that we're going to practice this feedback skill using a real example that they can either go back and do or that they're planning to do in the future. And we give them time to think through what is my intention in giving this feedback? What is it that I want for this person? What's in it for them to make these changes and start there And then what are the things that I've observed? What kind of impact is it having on them? Why do they need to change the behavior? And what's the impact on the team and the culture and the environment and all of that? But it's it's always this revelation that it takes them we give them, I mean, 10 minutes, but they don't do it when they're in their day-to-day job. They don't take that 10 minutes, but the revelation for them is the difference in the conversation that that 10 minutes makes,
Yeah.
of just sitting down and thinking through, how do I what are the things that I want to tell this person? And part of it
Right.
too is that piece of, what's the story that I'm telling myself
Right.
about why this person is performing this way, and can I suspend that and actually be curious and ask them and see where they are with this.
Hmm. I love that.
So it's
I
that
love it.
preparation time
Yeah. Yeah.
that we avoid preparation for things we're uncomfortable with.
Sure.
And so I think that the fact that there's little preparation is just, a reflection of how uncomfortable people feel with these conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, we're sort of both of us, both parties are kind of going in with that uncomfortableness. Is that a word? But yeah, but so yeah, I mean, so right away you've got that. It's not tension. It's probably a little bit of uncertainty, and which human need. We all need certainty. So it's
Right. Well,
yeah,
it triggers that fight flight.
sure,
It's uncertainty triggers fight flight, and then also if we feel like that we're being threatened and people are continuing to look at feedback, hopefully we're making a shift in that, but people still see feedback as a threat to the status quo, the way they do things and the way they've gotten used to doing things in their comfort zone, and also just a threat to their identity. And what is it that the person is doesn't like about me that they want me to change, right?
right,
So,
right, right. And the cortisol goes through the roof like you just said, in fight or flight. So their cortisol hormone is running through their veins at a high speed, and they are in fight or flight. Exactly. So as leaders, one of the things that sort of a brain hack that I used is the words that we use. It's always nice to say, by the way, I want to start out this session by saying that I absolutely appreciate everything that you do for this company, for the team, for myself, and for yourself. I appreciate you, and that word alone releases oxytocin across the heart. We know that, and from the neuroscience, it brings down the cortisol. So that one word. So write it down. Appreciate you. Two words, I guess. I appreciate you, but if you write that down, because I'll tell you, if you start your skill wheel or your feedback session with that word, it will trigger oxytocin, which is the love hormone. I love to talk about that, but it's also the hormone of belonging and having empathy and having grace, which we all need right now. So I think
yeah.
that's a great way to start a feedback session, and it's just a brain hack that you can use because when you come into those sessions, a person on the other side of that table could be absolutely in fight or flight.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good
And
way to
can I
lower
say
that
one thing
cortisol.
about that though? And I think that it's critical that it's not gratuitous. Appreciation.
Of
You
course,
you really have to spend the time up front really thinking through, what is
yes,
it that you appreciate about this person, because people
yeah,
like specificity. They don't like general comments like,
yes,
okay, be able to follow it up with actual examples of
love it.
things that they do that bring unique value that's unique to them. Like, what is the unique value that they're bringing that you appreciate? And just
Yeah.
one thing can really make it believable, and even do more to calming their nervous system and go, "Okay, you see me. Like, you actually do see me."
Yeah, I mean, being an authentic leader is step one. You can't really, be a leader without being authentic these days, and you can't be a good leader, that's for sure. So yeah,
Yeah,
being authentic. I love being specific. That's wonderful. And I think if you use those words, then you can manage the state of that person and get those right chemicals running through their body. So they are open and they are ready. They are willing. They have a growth mindset. All those things come to bear when they have the right chemicals running through their body for that feedback session. So if you have
yeah,
those skills as a leader, trust me, that's where you're going to shine, and your team will shine, and that feedback session will be great for both of you, right? So
yeah. And I
great.
think they really have done a lot of research around coachability and willingness, and what are the components of willingness and coachability, what defines someone as being coachable. And It's really comes down to, does somebody seek feedback? Do they receive the feedback, and do they act on it? And I think all of those things are impacted by the culture and by the organization and by the leader. So for someone to seek feedback, they have to have a growth mindset. It has to have a growth culture where I'm seeking feedback, admitting that I'm not
Right.
perfect, right?
Right. Right.
And then to be able to
Mm.
receive the feedback, there has to be a true investment by the leader, and belief by the person that that leader is invested in them. And then the acting on the feedback, it's about having resources, and being supplied with the things that you need to be able to develop the skill, or to, is the organization supporting the skill development
Mm.
at the resource level, and does the person believe that? Do they know? Do they even Are they even aware of
Yeah.
all of the resources that are out there? And so I think that there's a great opportunity for leaders to impact willingness. They may not realize how much of an impact they tend. I think people tend to think that willingness is an internal like just
Mm.
an
Yeah.
internal intrinsic thing within the person.
Yeah.
And I think that they fail to understand the impact they can have as a leader on a person's willingness, what the opportunities are.
So let me ask you kind of a different question as a leader. What do you do when you see willingness kind of start to fade? And you kind of watching that employee or team member, and you're like, "Oh no, now what do I do?" This is a really interesting one, right? Because we all sort of sometimes lose that spark, don't we? I mean,
Yeah.
that's just life.
And I think that the first thing that a leader has to do is suspend their need to know,
Mm.
to be the one that comes up with, "Oh, I
Right.
know what's going on with that person. I know
Right.
what's affecting."
Right.
And again, it just comes back to that curiosity and open-mindedness and a conversation and connecting. If you see someone's willingness start to fade, and they've previously been a high performer, then something's going on. And uh, don't you want to know what's happening, what's going
Yeah.
on? And
Yeah.
so, respecting personal boundaries, but also saying, "Hey, I see you. I notice
Mm,
that
mm.
something's changed. Can we talk about that? And what can I do to help? To do you need some time off? Do you need, let's just be honest. Of what can you manage this? Whatever's going on, and how can I help you manage it?"
Right. So it is that emotional intelligence, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's
like,
really what we're talking
again,
about.
just recognizing that someone's willingness, right? Like, having
Yeah.
the external view of being able to get out of yourself and quit focusing on yourself and look at another person and say, "There's
Yeah.
something going on with that person, and and I wanna find out why. I care about them."
So how do you do that? How have you done that in the past? What tell me a story about that. I got you again.
I think there's this wonderful, model. It's called Crucial Conversations, and it
Ugh.
it really helps to handle those difficult conversations when emotions are high. And so it really, the first step is understanding your story, and then understanding what the other person's story might
Mm.
be, and getting ready for that, like really exploring that piece of it. So I think, coming to a situation, really owning my biases and saying, I'm telling myself, because I wanna feel in control, and I
Yeah.
wanna control the outcome of this conversation,
Yeah.
and just suspending the need, that attachment to outcomes that can get us in trouble. And so we have to be attached to a different outcome. Not, I want the outcome of this particular conversation to be, but my attachment needs to be on the outcome of the
Ah,
relationship. And
yes,
and
yes.
so and how do I want to continue to help and develop this person, that I'm not so invested in the outcome of this one detailed conversation or thing that we're discussing.
Right, that human connection, right? Yeah. That's wonderful. Awesome, awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, let's get
and I do
right.
wanna admit, better in theory than in practice, though. It's always hard. Always hard.
Yeah.
And the more invested you are in the person,
Yeah.
the more difficult the conversations can be, because you really want that outcome for them, and you wanna drive it and control it. And stepping back from that attachment is a discipline, daily discipline for me.
Yeah, it's hard. I know going just looking back at some of the team members that I truly have love in my heart for, and that I got really close to many of my teams. And then you have those difficult conversations where you have to sort of approach them and say, I just something's off. Help me, help me understand what's going on here, and let's come up with a solution together. And yeah, it could be some time off, it could be a different job, it could be a bunch of things. It depends on, the stress level at the time, what's going on and what we're dealing with. So I love that you're taking that and you're bringing that to leadership so they can be self-aware of what that really means and how that affects the people under their charge. Oh, well done. I love that. Any tips for sort of leaders to as they go into these discussions? I know we've given them so much that I'm sure they're writing feverishly in the notebooks. I know they are. Hopefully, they're not driving while they're doing it, but yeah, I know. But I know that there's so many tidbits here that I know we got from this conversation, but I wanna try and put a bow around it where, you get a chance to see, what's the most important thing you can tell leaders when it comes to these discussions and being in this skill will world that leaders have to live in every day. They have to do it. So
Yeah.
how do you get to have to, hey, I'm really excited to be doing this?
Yeah. I think the first thing is accept your job as the leader is about
Mhm.
developing your team, leading your
Yeah.
team, and connecting with your team.
Yeah.
That's a really big part of what your job is now that you're a leader. So I think that especially in the sales arena, people they like to close deals and they like to have the interaction with the customers and the clients. And I've worked with a lot of sales leaders that really had a difficult time transitioning from that OSR
Oh,
to a
yeah.
sales leadership position because they didn't wanna give up that validation they got from being the closer or and they were really good at it, and now they
Yeah.
have to really develop a different tool set and skill set to be able to do that. So I think, owning your job, owning your role, is the first thing, and then really trying to cultivate that growth mindset, whether it's through your own vulnerability and in sharing your own growth and journey and mistakes and how you've learned, but also figuring out where there is what's your tolerance for risk and where is there room for some risk taking, which enables the person to have a little bit more control over how they address the feedback. So if you're willing to give some freedom there to the person to come up with their own action plan and come up with things that work for them, then they're going to be more engaged and more connected to it. And understanding that what works for you doesn't work for them. We're
Right.
all different and
Right.
motivated
Right.
by different things. And just demonstrate that investment. Let them know that you're giving them the feedback for their growth and
Yeah.
development. That it's not about making you look good and that you want them to improve their performance. It
Yeah.
it it is about, I mean, yes, the organization needs performance, but you're having this conversation because you're invested in their growth and development, or you wouldn't
Well,
bother. You
right.
wouldn't bother with the discomfort and and having the conversation.
That's true. If you're not really gonna have that conversation, you become indifferent and then you really don't go anywhere, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
as a person, yeah, exactly. So, I'm a big call to action person, right? I know you are too, I'm sure. So you get through all this and, all those great pieces of advice and you're on fire. You're like, "You've got this," you've been authentic and you've shown that how much you appreciate them, and you've given specific examples of that, and now you're trying to work together and you're collaborating and you're open and your heart's open and you got all the right stuff going on and you kind of finishing up with all this, and now it's like, okay, you don't want this to like just kind of drop. What's the next thing you do to kind of what's the call to action? How do you make this thing and really activate what you've just talked about for the last hour or so?
Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing that you need to get is a commitment
Yeah.
and a time frame around that commitment. So gives the person to ask them, how committed are you to making taking these actions, and when are you planning to execute this action plan, so that you still need to monitor and manage this,
Yeah.
and it's not through direction, direct control, but it's through checking in and saying, how's it going, and do we need to shift? And it's also being open to the action plan shifting and being flexible with that, because we're asking people to experiment when we're asking them to act on feedback. They're changing their behavior, they're
Yeah.
experimenting with something new. And so through that experiment, we may need to fine tune
Yeah.
what they're doing. But I think that it's, get that commitment, and really get them to commit to a time frame that enables you to be able to check in with them and see how it's going.
And that you both agree on, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're both invested, right? It's not a one-sided table where you have 8 issues you have 8 calls to action. I have 1 to call you and check in on you, say that you're actually doing these 8 things. That wouldn't work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Kelly, you've given us so many things to think about in what could be a very, oh, not the best part of your job kind of thing. It's like now I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm ready to do this. I think I'm great. I think I could really pull this off, and I'm in a good mindset, and I've shifted what my biases are, and I'm going in there to give versus get. I'm gonna be open and honest and authentic as a leader. I'm gonna serve that person, and we're gonna have a call to action afterwards that we're both highly invested in, so we can see that movement. And if some of that skill will is waning, we're going to have an honest, open, authentic conversation to find out
Yeah.
what's really going on with that person, not the employee, and see if we can help. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Just be
I love.
curious. Just be
Yeah, be curious.
curious.
I love that.
Yeah.
Be curious. I'll leave you with that. Be curious. I love that. And thanks again, Kelly. We had a great time.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. This is Rob Swymer with the JourneyCast signing off for this episode. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Thanks.